Sir, I need you to step out of that chair and walk over here.
Officer, I'm paralyzed. I'm a paraplegic. I can't walk. I haven't been able to walk since 2015.
Sure you can. I've seen this act before. People faking disabilities to get sympathy. Stand up.
I'm not faking anything. I have a spinal cord injury at T10. I physically cannot walk. My medical doctor...
The confrontation unfolded at exactly 2:15 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday afternoon outside the Riverside Community Center, where Officer Gerald Whitmore had made the reckless decision to believe that 37-year-old Elijah Reeves was pretending to be paralyzed to avoid following commands. What happened next, recorded by several security cameras and seen by more than a dozen witnesses, would soon become one of the most disturbing cases of police misconduct in recent history, leading to devastating injuries, a massive $4.1 million settlement, and the total collapse of an officer's career. Before we move forward, tell us where you're watching from right now. Drop your city or country in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because what comes next will completely shock you. Stories like this deserve to be seen, and your support helps us bring the truth into the light. Elijah Reeves had been paralyzed for 9 years. A car accident in 2015, he wasn't even driving, only a passenger in the wrong place at the wrong time, had shattered his spinal cord at the T10 vertebra. Everything below his mid-torso went completely silent. No feeling, no movement, no control. The doctors were blunt and honest. He would never walk again. The spinal cord does not heal itself. The damage was irreversible. Elijah spent 18 months in rehabilitation, learning how to survive in a wheelchair, learning how to transfer his body, learning how to function in a world designed for people who could walk, learning how to face the stairs, the pity, the assumptions. He still built a life. He worked as a graphic designer, freelancing from home. He stayed active in the disabled community, volunteering at the Riverside Community Center, where adaptive sports programs and support groups were offered for people with disabilities. He learned to use a hand cycle to stay active. He modified his apartment. He battled his insurance company for the equipment he needed. He did everything right. His wheelchair was custom-fitted, an $8,000 piece of medical equipment prescribed by his doctor and approved by insurance only after months of appeals. It wasn't just a chair. It was his legs. It was his freedom. It was the line between living independently and relying completely on others. That Tuesday afternoon in October, Elijah had just finished volunteering at the community center. He had been helping guide a support group for newly injured paraplegics. People who were walking the same painful path he'd been forced onto 9 years earlier. Helping others adjust to a life they never chose was meaningful work, and it gave him purpose. At 2:10 p.m., he rolled out of the building and headed toward the accessible parking spot where his van was parked. The van was fully adapted, equipped with hand controls, a motorized ramp, secure tie-downs for his wheelchair, everything required for him to drive on his own. He was dressed in jeans, sneakers that would never wear down because his feet never touched the pavement, and a t-shirt from the adaptive sports program. A medical alert bracelet was clearly visible on his right wrist. His wheelchair was covered with several stickers, including one that read "Paralyzed Veteran." He wasn't actually a veteran, but he liked showing support for disabled vets. Officer Gerald Whitmore was parked across the street from the community center. He had been watching the entrance for nearly 20 minutes, waiting for someone. Whitmore was 41 years old, a 15-year veteran of the police department, and his record raised serious concerns. Over the course of his career, 17 complaints had been filed against him, 9 involving excessive force or allegations of racial bias. He'd been disciplined 3 times, receiving written reprimands, mandatory retraining, and 1 3-day suspension that he appealed and successfully reduced to a single day. The pattern was obvious to anyone willing to look. Whitmore had an issue with his authority being challenged. He struggled with people who didn't instantly comply with his commands. And he had a specific problem with black men who, in his mind, failed to show him the respect he believed he deserved. That afternoon, Whitmore was supposedly searching for a suspect in a minor theft case. The description was a young black male, around 5 foot 10 inches, medium build, wearing dark clothing. It was vague enough to describe thousands of people. When Whitmore saw Elijah rolling out of the community center, something in his mind clicked that never should have. The suspect was described as able-bodied and walking. Elijah was clearly in a wheelchair. But Whitmore saw a black man of roughly the right age and build, and that was enough for him. He stepped out of his patrol car and walked directly toward Elijah. "Excuse me, sir. I need to speak with you." Elijah stopped his wheelchair and turned his head. "Where are you coming from?" "The community center. I volunteer there. I was helping run a support group." "What's in the bag?" Whitmore pointed toward the backpack hanging from the back of Elijah's wheelchair. "Personal items. My wallet, phone, some paperwork from the group." "Why?" "I need to search it." Elijah felt his stomach tighten. He had been through moments like this before. Random stops. Suspicious tones. The quiet assumption that he must be doing something wrong. But usually, once officers noticed the wheelchair, they at least pretended to show respect. "Do you have probable cause to search my belongings?" Elijah asked, keeping his voice calm. "I haven't done anything wrong." Whitmore's face hardened. "I'm investigating a theft in the area. You match the description of the suspect." "A theft suspect? I'm in a wheelchair. How would I?" Elijah caught himself. "Officer, I think there's been a mistake. I've been inside that building for the past 3 hours. Multiple people can confirm that." "Step out of that chair." The words seemed to freeze the air around them. Elijah stared at Whitmore, trying to understand what he'd just heard. "I'm sorry." "What?" "I said, step out of that chair. I need to verify you're actually disabled." Elijah's mind raced. This couldn't be real. "Officer, I am paralyzed. I'm a paraplegic. I can't walk. I haven't walked since 2015. "Sure you can," Whitmore replied, his voice heavy with disbelief. "I've seen this act before. People faking disabilities for sympathy, to avoid responsibility, to get benefits they don't deserve. Stand up." Have you ever had someone doubt a serious medical condition? Drop a comment and let me know, because what happens next shows just how dangerous those assumptions can be. "I'm not faking anything," Elijah said, his voice rising. "I have a spinal cord injury at T10. I physically cannot walk. My medical paperwork is in my bag. I can show you my medical ID card, my wheelchair prescription, whatever you need." "I don't need paperwork," Whitmore said. "I need to see you stand up and walk. I literally cannot stand. My legs don't work." "What part of paralyzed don't you understand?" People were beginning to stop and watch. A woman exiting the community center paused on the steps. A man walking his dog across the street slowed down. 2 teenagers on a nearby bench pulled out their phones. Whitmore noticed the growing audience, and instead of calming down, he became more aggressive. He had already committed to this path, and backing. "I am paralyzed. My spinal cord is severed. No amount of willpower or compliance is going to make my legs work. Last chance," Whitmore said coldly. "Stand up and walk to me, or I'm going to pull you out of that chair myself." The threat was so ridiculous, so reckless, that Elijah almost laughed. But Whitmore's face showed no hesitation. He was serious. "You can't do that," Elijah said. "You'll hurt me. My legs can't support any weight. If you pull me out, I'll collapse. Please, just look at my medical ID. It's right here." Elijah reached toward his wallet. "Don't reach for anything," Whitmore barked, his hand moving to his weapon. Elijah froze instantly. "Hands up. I was just getting my ID. It has my medical information. That's it. I'm done playing games." Whitmore stepped forward and grabbed Elijah's arm. "Don't," Elijah shouted. "You're going to hurt me." The woman on the community center steps broke into a run. "Stop. He's actually paralyzed. I know him. He volunteers here. He really can't walk." Whitmore ignored her completely. He hooked his arms under Elijah's and yanked. Elijah's body came out of the wheelchair like a rag doll, His legs, incapable of holding any weight, immediately gave way. He pitched forward, and Whitmore, unprepared for the sudden dead weight, lost his grip. Elijah slammed face first into the pavement. His hands flew out on instinct, but his lower body collapsed uselessly beneath him. His right wrist absorbed the full impact, and he felt it snap. A sharp, blinding pain ripped through his arm. He lay sprawled on the ground, his lifeless legs twisted at unnatural angles, his wrist screaming, his face burning from scraping against the concrete. The woman dropped to her knees beside him. "Oh my God! Are you okay? Don't move." Whitmore stood frozen, staring at Elijah's motionless legs. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. He actually can't walk," Whitmore muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Of course he can't walk," the woman screamed. "He's paralyzed. I've known him for 3 years. He volunteers here every week. What is wrong with you?" The man with the dog had his phone to his ear, calling 911. The teenagers had recorded everything. More people poured out of the community center, drawn by the shouting. Elijah tried to push himself up with his left hand, but his right wrist was useless. "My wheelchair," he gasped. "I need my wheelchair." "Don't move," the woman said. "An ambulance is coming." "I need my wheelchair," Elijah repeated, his voice urgent now. Without it, he was completely helpless. He couldn't even sit up on his own. He couldn't move. He was just a body on the pavement now, exposed, helpless, completely vulnerable. Whitmore seemed to snap out of his stupor. "Sir, remain calm. Medical assistance is on the way." "You did this," Elijah shouted, his voice cracking. "I told you I couldn't walk. I told you, and you pulled me out anyway." More people had gathered by then. Nearly 15 onlookers, many from the disability support group Elijah had just finished leading. They recognized him immediately. They knew his story, and they were furious. "That's Elijah," a man in a wheelchair called out. "He's been paralyzed for 9 years. Everybody here knows that." "He pulled him out of his chair," someone else yelled. "We all saw it. He assaulted a disabled man." Whitmore reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I need an ambulance at Riverside Community Center. Subject has fallen and is injured." Subject has fallen. Not, "I pulled a paralyzed man from his wheelchair." Not, "I caused these injuries." Subject has fallen. Passive language, stripping himself of responsibility. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes. The paramedics took one look at Elijah on the ground, his wheelchair overturned nearby, and immediately understood what had happened. "Sir, are you paralyzed?" one paramedic asked gently. "Yes. T10 complete. Since 2015, Elijah replied, his voice flat as shock began to take hold. "He pulled me out of my chair. My right wrist is broken, I think. And my face." The paramedics moved with extreme care, knowing that improper handling of a paralyzed patient could cause even more damage. They stabilized his wrist, examined his head and neck, and then, with practiced precision, transferred him onto a stretcher using proper lifting techniques, not the violent yanking Whitmore had used. "We're taking him to City General," the lead paramedic told Whitmore. "Someone needs to bring his wheelchair. That's expensive medical equipment." One of the community center staff carefully retrieved Elijah's wheelchair and loaded it into the ambulance. As they were closing the doors, one of the teenagers who had been filming stepped forward. "Officer, I recorded the entire thing. You want to see it?" Whitmore's face drained of color. "That won't be necessary. I'm posting it anyway," the teenager said. "People need to see what you did." Should officers who ignore clear medical conditions be held personally responsible for the injuries they cause? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this case would put that exact question to the test. At City General Hospital, the diagnosis was worse than Elijah had feared. A broken wrist that would require surgery. A fractured cheekbone from the impact with the pavement. Multiple abrasions. And most concerning, potential damage near the areas where he still retained sensation. The violent fall had jolted his entire body, and doctors were worried about secondary complications. He was admitted for observation. His wrist was set and placed in a cast. His face was cleaned and bandaged. But the emotional damage was harder to treat. I told him. Elijah kept repeating to the nurses, the doctors, and later to his wife when she arrived. I told him I couldn't walk. I told him he would hurt me. He didn't believe me. His wife, Nia, stood beside the hospital bed, shaking with rage and fear. How could he not believe you? She said. You're in a wheelchair. You were wearing a medical alert bracelet, Nia said, her voice shaking. What more proof did he need? He thought I was faking, Elijah replied quietly. He thought I was lazy, or trying to scam the system. He looked at me and saw a liar, not someone telling the truth about a disability. Later that evening, a hospital social worker stopped by his room. Her tone was calm but serious. Mr. Reeves, I need to ask you some questions about what happened. Anytime we treat injuries caused during a police interaction, we're required to file a report. Elijah told the story again, every detail. The social worker wrote carefully, her face growing more disturbed with each sentence. Did the officer ever ask to see medical documentation? I offered to show him my medical ID card, Elijah said. He refused. He just kept demanding that I stand up and walk. And there were witnesses? At least a dozen. Several people recorded it. And the community center has security cameras that probably captured everything. She nodded slowly. I'll make sure all of this is thoroughly documented. What happened to you was unconscionable. Elijah spent 2 nights in the hospital. His wrist required surgery, pins and plates that would delay his recovery by months. The damage to his face would leave permanent scars. And the emotional trauma of being ripped from his wheelchair, thrown onto the pavement, and having his disability dismissed as a lie would take far longer to heal. While Elijah lay in his hospital bed, the video began spreading online. It showed Whitmore grabbing him and pulling him from the chair. And it showed, in horrifying clarity, Elijah's body collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut, his legs unable to hold him, his face slamming into the pavement. The reaction was immediate and furious. Disability rights advocates shared the video widely. Medical professionals expressed disbelief that an officer could ignore such an obvious condition. Civil rights attorneys across the country took notice. One of them was Cassandra Williams, a well-known civil rights lawyer who had successfully handled multiple high-profile police misconduct cases. She contacted Elijah while he was still hospitalized. Mr. Reeves, I've seen the video. I'd like to represent you if you're willing. What that officer did was assault, and you deserve justice. Elijah and Nia talked it through. They had never sued anyone before. The idea felt overwhelming, especially while Elijah was recovering from surgery and facial injuries. But Cassandra explained why it mattered. This isn't just about you, she said. It's about every disabled person who's been accused of faking. Every time someone's medical reality has been dismissed. When officers decide their assumptions matter more than documented truth, people get hurt. Officer Whitmore must be held accountable, and so must the department that allowed this to happen. They agreed. The internal affairs investigation began almost immediately. Within 48 hours, Whitmore was placed on administrative leave, not out of initiative, but because the video had gone viral and public pressure was intense. Investigators pulled everything. Whitmore's body camera footage, which he had conveniently failed to activate. Security footage from the community center showing the incident from multiple angles. Cell phone videos from 4 witnesses. Medical records confirming Elijah's paralysis. Statements from all 15 eyewitnesses. The evidence was overwhelming. On day 5, Whitmore was called in for questioning. He arrived with his union representative. Walk us through what happened, the internal investigator said. Whitmore tried to justify himself. I was investigating a theft. The suspect description matched. I approached the individual. He refused to comply with my orders. What orders? I ordered him to stand up and properly identify himself. You ordered a man in a wheelchair to stand? I suspected he was faking the disability. In your 15 years on the force, have you personally encountered paralyzed individuals faking their condition? Silence. Have you received any training suggesting this is common? More silence. Mr. Reeves told you he was paralyzed. He offered medical documentation. Multiple witnesses heard him explain his condition. Why did you believe he was lying? Whitmore had no answer that didn't expose his bias. He had assumed Elijah was lying because he saw non-compliance as defiance, not physical impossibility. I made a judgment call, Whitmore finally said. That judgment call resulted in a paralyzed man being dragged from his wheelchair and seriously injured, the investigator replied. His wrist is broken. His face is fractured. He's traumatized. All because you refused to believe a clearly stated medical condition. The investigator slid medical records across the table. Mr. Reeves has been paralyzed since 2015. T10 complete spinal cord injury. 9 years in a wheelchair. His condition is thoroughly documented. He wears a medical alert bracelet. He offered proof, and you ignored it. Whitmore's union representative tried to interrupt. Officer Whitmore was operating under the belief that a man in an $8,000 custom wheelchair, wearing a medical alert bracelet, volunteering at a disability center, was faking paralysis? The investigator cut in. What reasonable evidence supported that belief? The interview lasted 3 hours. By the end, it was clear Whitmore had no justification. He made an assumption, rejected evidence that contradicted it, and violently assaulted a disabled man as a result. The Internal Affairs report was scathing. It detailed Whitmore's long history of complaints, repeated excessive force allegations, and documented problems with authority. It concluded that this incident was not an isolated mistake, but the predictable result of years of unchecked behavior. The recommendation was termination. But the investigation went further. How had Whitmore remained on the force for 15 years? Why had 17 complaints resulted in minimal discipline? Who had failed to intervene? The department's Civilian Oversight Board launched its own review. They examined complaint files, use of force reports, and training records across the precinct. What they found was deeply troubling. Whitmore was not an outlier. He was part of a culture that prioritized obedience over compassion, treated questions as threats, and allowed escalation without accountability. The board issued sweeping recommendations. A complete overhaul of use of force policies, mandatory disability awareness and de-escalation training, independent review of excessive force complaints, and disciplinary action against supervisors who had ignored clear warning signs for years.